I can't put it down, it's my new addiction. It's all in my head, but I want non-fiction. I don't like the world, but I like fantasy. Fairies, fucking girls, and they're pretty. Hailey, do you like to read? I wrote this so you'd sleep with me. It's like 199 degrees when I go to the smart hut, S-M-U-T-H-U-T. All this filth I've gotta read. Mass men crossing boundaries brings me to my fucking knees. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Throbbing, swelling, pulsing, peen. Big fat tit stick in between. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Draco fucked Hermione. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Draco fucked Hermione. I wake up alone staring at my ceiling. I try not to care, so I just start reading. Sits in the cup chair, he watches me finish. He just likes to stare, and my god, he's British. Jobs to satisfy his needs. Those man bets I just wanna squeeze. Feels like I'm gonna sneeze. Squid isn't pee-pee, won't somebody breed me? S-M-U-T-H-U-T. All this filth I've gotta read. Mass men crossing boundaries brings me to my fucking knees. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Throbbing, swelling, pulsing, peen. Big fat tit stick in between. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Draco fucked Hermione. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Draco fucked Hermione. Yes, he did. He fucked her real nice. Yes, he did. He fucked her twice. Yes, he did. He fucked her a lot. He fucked in the shed and he fucked in the smart babe. Sorry about that.
Okay, we made it. Hello, everyone. If you are watching on YouTube, I'm going to explain. We just had to do a very drastic 180 because I was getting clapped, and now we are here. So I didn't really get to properly explain what's going on. So I'm going to explain that now while everyone has to sit on their hands. Forcibly sit on their hands. Welcome to the Smut Hut. We do this on Saturdays. We read 2 chapters of a book called Manacled, which is a dark romance based on the universe of Harry Potter. It is honestly better. I'm sorry. It's just been a crazy night. It's honestly better than the original series. It's what I truly believe, and a lot of people who read the book truly do believe would be if Harry Potter was written for adults. Like, this is what would really happen, unfortunately. So we are gonna read 2 chapters. Now, Manacled is a fan fiction, but don't let that it is incredible. It is so well written. It is beautiful. It is complicated. It is deep. It's dark. It's twisted. It's amazing. It is a fan fiction dark romance surrounding Draco and Hermione from Harry Potter. Trigger warnings are extensive, so viewer discretion is advised. Rape, mutilation, forced marriage, degradation, forced breeding, death, war, suicide. Welcome in, everybody. If you haven't watched any of the episodes and you want to catch up, you can do !TGGC. That's short for the Good Girls Club. That's what our book club is called, the Good Girls Club. Although you don't have to be a girl to enjoy it. It's for everybody. But welcome to the Smut Hut. Welcome to Manacled. I'm going to do my best to collect my anus before we begin. So, Manacled is a 3-volume book series. So there's volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3. We are just now delving into volume 3. Volume 3, so how this works is volume 1 is sort of, the timeline of this is like, volume 2 is the past. Volume 1 is the middle, and volume 3 is the end. I know that's very confusing, but it's amazing. So how volume 1 starts is, I'm going to give a summary of kind of where we're at. Obviously, we've read 2 entire books, so it's a lot to try to summarize, so I'm going to do my best. It's aesthetics. So volume 1, where the story starts. Hermione is underneath Hogwarts in sensory deprivation for 16 months after the good guys lose the war to the Death Eaters. During that time, she occludes, like uses magical ability to protect precious memories in her brain, even from herself. While she's in there, she also works out. She can't remember where she learned how to work out, but she physically uses internalized magic because she has magical manacles on her wrists that don't let her do any external magic. So she can only do self-inflicted magic. So she does self-inflicted magic that she uses to protect memories in her head. What ends up happening is she's pulled out of the dungeon and she's put into a forced reading program a la Handmaid's Tale. It's a ruse. It's really just a cover-up to distract from the fact that Voldemort's dying, but it's still fucked either way. So she is assigned to somebody named the High Reeve, who we find out is Draco Malfoy. She's given to Draco Malfoy in the purpose to perpetuate the pureblood lineage, right? Even though that makes no sense because she's technically a mudblood. So the fuck, but whatever. So she's assigned to Draco. During her time at Malfoy Manor, Hermione has horrific PTSD from her imprisonment underneath Hogwarts. She got very used to her cage, in a sense, in Hogwarts. So she has pretty much autoclarophobia, which I also have, which is a fear of very high ceilings. And also she has a fear of very large rooms, big spaces, which I don't have, just the ceiling part. So she has severe PTSD. She's traumatized. Everyone she knows died. She witnessed it. She remembers that. Everyone she knows dies. But after her memories of everyone dying, she can't remember anything else. But she is at Malfoy Manor. During that time, she's attacked. She's raped. It's a terrible situation. Her mind is also repeatedly mind raped by use of legamins from Voldemort to see what Draco's doing to her, to make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, whatever. It's all fucked. The hope is that she'll get pregnant, and then the pregnancy, the stronger the baby is, the more potent the baby's magic is, the more likely it will bust out all the memories that Hermione's been protecting, right? That's exactly what happens. So during her time, she does get pregnant from Draco. And the end of volume 1 is the pregnancy busts open all of her memories, and a floodgate of memories pour into her. That takes us to volume 2. Volume 2 is all the memories pouring into her, and she's remembering them, right? Volume 2 is what happened before Volume 1, which is really cool and very nifty in my opinion. So We're at Volume 2. Volume 2 is Hermione is the #1 most powerful healer that the Order of Phoenix has. She might be the best healer that's ever lived, okay? She's incredibly powerful, incredibly dedicated, and she is also the only one in the Order of Phoenix that keeps vying to use dark magic. Not even in in an aggressive way, but in a reflexive way. Like, she keeps saying, let me do dark magic. Let everyone respond with dark magic instead of stunners. And that, to me, is probably the biggest thing about the OG Harry Potter series that I feel like genuinely makes no sense. You're telling me that the Death Eaters are using tanks, bazookas, and then the good guys win with using stunners and Expelliarmus? There's no anyways, so the biggest pushback she gets is from Harry himself. Harry is like, we're not using dark arts, then we're not any better than the Death Eaters, whatever. Which is ridiculous. But it creates a divide and a serious wedge between her and her friends, creating a real sense of isolation for her. What then ends up happening is she feels isolated, and then Moody and Kingsley, who are the leaders of the Order of Phoenix, they reach out to her and they say, hi, Shadow Legion. And they reach out to her and they're like, hey, Malfoy wants to be a turncoat. He wants to be a spy like Snape. He wants to spy for us. And they don't know his motivations at the time. But the only thing he's requesting is he wants Hermione during and after the war. So she agrees. And during that time, she makes it her mission to make Draco emotionally dependent on her. Her goal is for him to fall in love with her, really. Whether she fully says it in that capacity or not, she wants to make him need her so much that he won't turn on the Order. And that's exactly what happens. So during their time together, she heals him. During their time together, he trains her to protect herself. He trains her in dark arts. He trains her. During that time, they're like two vipers poised, waiting for the other to betray each other, basically. And we find out that Draco's motivation is that Voldemort raped and tortured his mom for months, forced him to kill Dumbledore, and forced him to take the Dark Mark. And then, essentially, he didn't care. He killed his mom, and his mom died anyways. And then Draco bided his time, rose up the ranks of the Death Eaters to become the right hand of Voldemort, so that when he got found out to be the spy, it created the biggest topple effect possible of the Death Eaters. So he knew he was gonna rise. He rose for a year to be the right hand guy, and then he always thought it was gonna be Hermione who betrayed him, and he would be found out and then killed, right? So what ends up happening is he rises in the rank, but he does not get killed. Instead, it all culminates to Ginny is pregnant with Harry's baby. Harry goes to defeat Voldemort, and because Narcissa is dead, remember in the OG series, Narcissa's the one who says to Voldemort, he's dead, when Harry's not really dead, right? Well, in this universe, Narcissa isn't there. Lucius is there. So Lucius goes over to check on Harry, and guess what? Harry ain't dead, and Voldemort's like, well, he's gonna be. He's fucking Avadas him 6 times and then strings him up from the Astronomy Tower to rot. And Harry dies. And with Harry's death, basically everyone she knows dies horribly. Ginny is, Malfoy squirrels Ginny away as his last promise. He says, Hermione, you'll flee London if I take Ginny away. And and Hermione goes, yes. And she lied to him. He squirrels Ginny away. Hermione goes to protect Malfoy, kills almost all the Death Eaters in all of England, takes down hundreds of hags, werewolves, she's a badass, blows up the entire torture chamber that is Dolival's experimental lab. And in the process, she gets kidnapped by Graham Montague, and that's where the story of Volume 1 begins. So, here we go. We're in Volume 3 now. So we are going to begin Volume 3. This is now her at Malfoy Manor with Draco. She has memories. She's trying to remember them, but every time she kind of touches them, they hurt. But she has her memories. Not all of them. They're not in perfect order, but she has her memories, right? He doesn't even know what to do with himself at this point. He feels like he's done so much damage to her. He doesn't even know how to climb the hill of making it better. He doesn't know to touch her. He doesn't know what to fucking do at this point. And she isn't really whole either. She's not who she was before this either. So that's where we're at. I heard the book is Alchemist. I have not read it yet, but if it's anything even close to Manacled, then it is, I'm sure, amazing. Shadow Legion. All right, so here we go, guys. We are going to begin Chapter 66. Hopefully it's not as aggressive as a pigging. Chapter 66, June 2005. Draco stood, withdrawing his hands and walking back until he was nearly 5 feet away, fully out of arm's reach. He suddenly seemed uncertain, as though he no longer knew how to interact with her. His hands at his sides opened and closed while he hesitated and looked away from her. The grief and pain between had reinserted itself, sweeping in like a tidal wave. It hurt to look at him, to want him, to crave him as though he were oxygen, but not know how they'd ever reconcile everything that existed between them now. You should sleep, he said after a moment, glancing down and straightening his robes. I'll bring whatever books you want tomorrow. Hermione watched him, hesitating and drawing a quick breath. Do you want to stay? She forced the question out before she could reconsider it. Draco stared at her with his expression blank, and her heart began pounding painfully in her chest. His eyes unfocused and then cleared. You don't want me to, he said after studying her for a second longer, his mouth twisting in the corner. Don't try to force yourself into something because you feel obliged in some way. He turned on his heel and headed towards the door. No, she said, standing up, her voice sharp. Don't go. He froze. She swallowed, throat tightening. I want you to stay. I do. It's just sometimes she tripped over the words as she tried to explain. My memories are out of order. I can't always remember. She swallowed. Stay. I want you to. I don't want to be alone. She stepped carefully towards him. Will you? Her fingers were trembling as they brushed against the back of his hand. She was half braced that he might jerk back and shove her away. She swallowed and edged closer, studying his face. His expression was a mask. She looked down and slipped her fingers into his hand. She was hardly breathing, and her hand started shaking visibly. This would be fine. Just breathe, and it would be fine. Obedient, quiet, not to resist. She closed her eyes and drew a short, quick breath. The sound filled her ears. Hermione? Draco's voice made her eyes snap open as she looked up. He was staring down at her with a closed expression. Don't do this. He carefully took hold of her wrist and pulled his hand free of her fingers, tightening for a moment. I'll come see you tomorrow. No! She grasped his hand again. No! Don't go! I don't want you to go. I just... Her jaw trembled so much she struggled to speak. I don't... She swallowed and looked up at him. I only want to hold your hand. I don't want to... I can't say no if you... Because of the... Draco's eyes flickered and his hand in hers twitched away. She stared down at their hands, her hold tightening. Just stay, she said, inhaling sharply. I want to know you're not somewhere else. Hermione's heart racing until the blood roared in her ears, but she squared her shoulders and forced herself to walk towards her bed. It crossed her mind that maybe she should have agreed to a different room. Then it wouldn't be the same bed. She steeled herself, pushing the thought away. It would still be a bed. She'd still be lying on it and trusting him not to hurt her. She did trust him. She knew she trusted him. Always. She laid down on the far side of the bed and curled on her side, staring at him. He sat down slowly on the other side and looked so uncomfortable he seemed on the verge of apparating straight out of the room. She reached towards him. Her fingers twitched before he extended his hand and entwined their fingers. He leaned against the headboard. He didn't appear to have any intention of sleeping. She studied him, tracing her eyes over his face, trying to memorize him again. The more clearly she remembered him, the more overtly she could see the ways he'd changed. He looked spent, visibly ground down to the point that it showed in his features. His fingers twitched in her hand. He had tremors that didn't feel like typical cruciatus muscle damage. They felt psychosomatic, the long-term consequence of the cruciatus. Torture had been so overused on him that the effects had become permanent. Voldemort had punished him repeatedly for his failure in catching the Last Order member, the person responsible for destroying the locket Umbridge had worn. Hermione's throat closed and she gripped his hand tighter. Her voice caught. You destroyed the Horcrux the way you did because you hoped it would force Voldemort to still recall Severus in February, didn't you? He stared at her and then glanced away, moving his chin slightly in acknowledgement. There was a hollow sensation in her chest as she thought back on all the occasions she'd noticed he'd been tortured. All those times she told herself not to care, that he deserved it. Daily, for over a month. I am so sorry, Draco, she said. He stiffened as though the words had struck him and nearly jerked his hand away from her. Don't apologize to me. You don't have anything to apologize for. He snapped the words out as though they were on the verge of snarling. Hermione stared at him in silence until he looked away from her. You're angry at me, aren't you? She finally asked. Draco stared across the room, his expression unreadable. That doesn't mean you have any reason to apologize to me. Hermione studied him. Why not? Because, he blinked. I have to apologize first. He looked at the canopy over the bed. Draco, Christ, Granger. His voice was ragged and he ran a hand through his hair. You have no idea how much I'd hoped you'd never remember anything once you came here. What I wouldn't do to go back and get it right. If I hadn't told you, I'd blown my cover. If I'd lied and not tried to say goodbye, none of this would have happened to you. Hermione's throat tightened. It would have killed me if you'd sent me away and I'd found out later you died because I asked you to save Ginny. I would have never gotten over it. Not ever. I would do it all again, she said. Every second. I would do it all again to save you. There was a resounding silence. Draco stares at her, a mixture of shock and rage sweeping across his feet. You didn't save me, he said when he finally seemed capable of speaking at all. You just put us in hell for 2 years. It was like being punched. She felt herself pale as the blood rushed from her head. Her entire body curled inward. Draco's hold on her hand tightened, his expression instantly regretful. Wait, I didn't. She dipped her head down and tried to breathe. I tried to come back. Her voice shook. I really did. I know. I didn't mean. She looked away. You shouldn't have assumed that I'd be willing to lose you. Did you think I don't feel things as much as you? That I cared less because I had other obligations? You shouldn't have thought I cared less. I did everything I could to keep you safe. You don't know all the things I did to keep you safe. I promised. Every time you asked, I promised I was yours. Always. There aren't any exemptions or expiration dates on always. I'm just saying. A crushing pain in her head woke her in the morning. Her fingers were still entwined with Draco's in the center of the bed. He was asleep, but his features were tense. Finding him in bed with her was familiar. There weren't any conflicting memories in seeing him asleep. When he was close, it felt like slipping into the past. It was as natural and instinctive as breathing to touch him, to be near him. She felt as though she couldn't be close enough to him. It was mostly the in-between distances that she'd abruptly find herself back in the moment in which he was looming over her and forcing his way into her mind. When he'd closed in on her and gripped her by the arm as he apparated her. When he'd said something so cruel it blindsided her. But when he was close, he was Draco. He was hers. He'd been vulnerable with her. He loved her, even though he never expected them to be anything but doomed. He loved her all the same. She was cold and wanted to move closer, but she was afraid he might wake if she shifted. She stayed where she was and just looked at him. I'm going to take care of you. She mouthed the words silently. I'm going to find a way to take care of you. She felt it the instant he woke. Tension shot through his entire body as soon as he was conscious. His eyes snapped open and he stared at her. His eyes immediately narrowed. Are you all right? She twitched her shoulder. My head. It's always worse after a good day. He let go of her hand and touched her forehead. You're feverish again. She didn't expend the effort of moving her hand in acknowledgement. Can you eat? Her stomach twisted, rolling at the thought. Maybe later. His eyebrows knit together and he looked visibly worried. I'm required in Belgium today. I'll be back tomorrow. Stay in bed. He stood up, still studying her. Hermione stirred and lifted her head. You said you'd get me books. There was a flash of irritation in his eyes. His lips thinned. Tomorrow. No. You said today. I can still read. She tried to sit up. Otherwise, I'll just lie here, worrying. He sighed through his teeth. Fine. Stop getting up. I'll have Topsy bring you books, quills, and parchment after you've eaten. Hermione lay back down and pulled her arms more tightly against her body as she huddled, trying to feel warmer. She swallowed. I just need the books. I can't touch quills, so there's not much use for parchment. The muscles in Draco's jaw rippled. Right, he said as he came around the bed. Just the books, then. He conjured an extra blanket and draped it over her. Tell Topsy if you want anything. I'll be back tomorrow. Be careful, Draco. Don't. Her voice failed and she was quiet. You have to come back, she finally said. I will. Once he was gone, Hermione slumped more limply into the bed. She felt as though her skull was about to crack open. She felt miserably nauseous, but Draco had said Topsy wouldn't bring her books until she'd eaten. She didn't know if it would count if she vomited everything back up. At midday, she managed to keep a potion and a small cup of broth down. Topsy delivered a stack of books and a folio of handwritten pages that Hermione recognized as Draco's handwriting. All his notes from his attempts to remove his dark mark. Topsy propped Hermione up with pillows so she could lie on her side and read. Hermione tried to review the notes clinically and not think about the fact that Draco had been experimenting on unwilling subjects that had all died in the process. They were all Death Eaters, and several had helped to torture Narcissa. Draco had been thorough. His research and analysis had been comprehensive. He had to have taught himself a considerable amount of magi biology and healing theory in addition to his curse research. He tried 9 times, twice more since the war had ended. Hermione knew from her research that Voldemort had been a brilliant student at Hogwarts. Whenever he created the Dark Mark, he'd invested considerable time and effort into making an inescapable collar to lock around the throats of his followers. It wasn't particularly elaborate. It was simple, straightforward, and lethal. At the back of the folio was a set of notes in sharp, spiked handwriting. Severus, she realized, had also analyzed the mark. Hermione read through the notes twice and then curled into a tight ball, gripping her throbbing head and trying to think, trying to analyze. She kept grinding her teeth together as she struggled to cope with the pain. Eventually, she passed out. When she woke again, Draco was seated at the edge of the bed. He had her pregnancy guide open, his eyes skimming across the pages. She watched him for a moment. You're back, she said. He immediately closed the book and looked over at her. Her headache had faded again into something less debilitating. She sat up carefully and picked up the folio. I read your notes, but not the book you said. I have a few book titles I think might be useful. All right. His mouth quirked at the corner as he watched her. She strained the pages and fixed the corner of one that had been dog-eared. Part of the curse that interferes with blood's coagulation. It's a hemophilia type curse that may be a long-term side effect. I'll need to create a potion, a variation on what's used to counter vampire bites. It will require regular redosage, but once Voldemort dies, you might not have to keep taking it. She gnawed at her lip. It wouldn't address the immediate issue of getting the wound to close. You tried all the normal methods, even old muggle ones like cauterizing and tar, but I've just started. I'll find something. Draco nodded again and glanced away. The conversation was painfully stilted. Draco did not want to talk about his attempts in any further detail than the notes he provided. He was distracted and kept glancing towards the clock. His expression was appropriately engaged, but his eyes were flat as she mentioned theories that she wanted to explore. She realized as she watched him that he was indulging her. The notes and the books were just to appease her. They were the library, something to preoccupy her while he continued with his own plans. She stopped talking and started to stared at her lap. There was a long pause and he stood up. I'll have the books you mentioned sent later today. As he was leaving, he suddenly stopped and turned back. He stood staring at her and his mouth moved silently several times before he spoke. Granger, you don't... He stopped, and she saw his hand curl into a fist at his side before disappearing behind his back. He pressed his lips into a hard line and blinked before staring just past her. I never assumed you'd keep a pregnancy. He was almost expressionless as he spoke, but his Adam's apple dipped briefly. I can send a potion with you so you can resolve it once you're out of Europe. Just tell me. He cut himself off and looked down, setting his jaw. No, never mind that. There's no need. I'll send it. There's no reason for you to have to tell me what you choose. He turned on his heel and left before she could speak. Hermione lay in bed, tracing her fingers over her lower abdomen. If she searched, she could feel the small but firm beginning swell of her uterus just above her pelvis. It hadn't occurred to her to have an abortion if she escaped, or that it would be the assumption Draco would be operating under. She would have jumped out a window or poisoned herself in order to prevent a baby from being born into Malfoy Manor and left in the care of Astoria. But it hadn't occurred to her to abort it if she escaped. It was a baby to Hermione. It had been a baby since the moment Stroud had announced Hermione was pregnant. Not a fetus, not an heir, it was just a baby, and one she'd already felt intensely protective of. When she'd seen the fluttering light of the heartbeat, it had felt like her heart had been stolen. But Draco was assuming she wouldn't keep it once she had a choice in the matter. He raped her. She was pregnant. He expected she'd want an abortion as soon as she was free. He was assuming that he'd stay behind to die and she would leave to try to forget everything that had ever happened by erasing it. Did I skip a page? Topsy came in with a stack of books in the evening, several which were brand new. Is Draco here? Hermione asked as she turned one of the books over in her hands. He has just returned. Can you tell him that I want him? Topsy gave a bobbing curtsy and popped away. Hermione went over the portrait on the wall. Narcissa Malfoy stared at Hermione. Hermione had only seen Narcissa once at the Quidditch World Cup more than a decade earlier. Narcissa was 16 in this painting, the same age Draco had been when he took the Dark Mark. I want to save your son, Hermione said, but I don't know how to. Narcissa said nothing. She just sat in her chair, studying Hermione in silence. Eventually, Hermione gave up and turned away. She was flipping through the books that Topsy had brought when the door opened, and Draco stood in the doorway. Hermione closed the book. Her throat tightened. He always stood so far away, and every inch of space felt weighted. Your mother's portrait won't talk to me, she said. Draco looked over. The portrait stood looking at Draco for a moment before turning and disappearing out of the frame. It's not you. She doesn't talk to anyone but me. My father spent hours begging her to just look at him. The frame used to be in the drawing room of the South Wing. The portrait saw everything that happened to my mother. It stopped speaking for a long time afterwards. When my mother was released, she took the portrait up to her rooms. His eyes were flat and unreadable. She used to stand in front of it for hours, touching the portrait's hand on the canvas as though they were trying to reach each other. Hermione stared at the empty frame. Voldemort's influence was like poison in the Malfoy family, as though he'd branded himself not only onto Draco and Lucius's arms, but into the fabric of their legacy. He destroyed Narcissa and corrupted their home. Even the portrait, a shadow of Narcissa's memory, was silent and scarred. Draco looked back at Hermione. She asked to watch over you. Oh, sorry. This is him talking. She asked to watch over you. She wanted to be sure you were all right while you were here. Hermione forced a wan smile before glancing down, hesitating for several seconds. Her hands crept towards her stomach as she looked up. I wanted to talk to you about what you said earlier, before you left. Draco's expression instantly closed and his gaze sharpened like a blade. Hermione's chest tightened. Draco was suddenly looming over her, the same cold expression on his face. You want me to look at you, Granger? Fine, I'm looking. It's delightful, I must say, to see all the guilt in your eyes. You know, I used to think the circumstances of my servitude to the Dark Lord were as cruel and enslavement as anyone could conceive. But I admit, it pales somewhat beside you. That's a memory. Her heart stalled, and she blinked repeatedly, trying to refocus on the present. Can you come closer? Her mouth felt dry. It's easier to talk to you when you aren't so far away. He walked over, and her heart rate increased with every step. His expression was guarded. She gnawed at her lower lip. She looked up when he was standing only a foot away. If she touched him, he wouldn't seem so cold. He didn't look like he wanted her to touch him. She forced herself not to dwell on it, lifting her chin and meeting his gaze. I didn't realize you expected me to terminate the pregnancy if I escaped. I understand why you thought I might before, but I'm not. I wouldn't. His expression didn't change. His eyes didn't flicker with even a slight reaction. You may change your mind once you're free. Hermione shook her head. I won't. His eyes remained flat, but she could see the tension in the corners of them. He strained so that he loomed over her, and she felt as though she were being strangled. His lips curled so that his teeth flashed. There's no reason to make commitments to me regarding what you'll do once you're free. Do what you want. Hermione set her jaw. I'm going to, and that's why I won't use it. I want you to know that I won't. I would always regret it. I would always wonder if the baby would have your eyes. Every winter, I'd think about how old they'd be and wonder what they'd be doing. I would try to guess what kind of wand they would have gotten and what subjects they would have liked and whether they'd have a natural occupants like you and me. She was speaking quickly because her throat was growing thick. Her cheekbones were beginning to ache. I would wonder if they'd like to read, if they'd have hair like mine. If you die, I would want to tell them all about you, everything about you. I've never gotten to tell anyone about you. Her chest spasmed. People should know what you're really like. Draco scoffed in the back of his throat and glanced up towards the ceiling. What I'm like? What exactly do you think I'm like? He gave a short laugh. You have a chance to have a new life? Don't drag my memory with you. Hermione shook her head. He stared down at her, his gaze hard. Do you want to walk through your life with a Death Eater's bastard chained to you? The whole world knows you're here and what I did to you in this house. It was quite thoroughly publicized, as you may recall. No matter what color eyes it has or how old it gets, it will be the child of a murderer, conceived because I raped you while you were my prisoner, and everyone will know that. Everyone. His chest jerked as he spoke, and he looked away from her. Leave it all behind, Granger. He inhaled. Have children with someone else someday. Hermione stared at him. Is that what you think I'm going to do? Run away and hide and pretend that you were a monster I was lucky to get away from? He stared down at her, expression unreadable. It wouldn't be a lie. Hermione met his silver eyes and saw the flat, empty resignation in them. A memory. I hate you. I hold you partly responsible for every person who has died so far in this war and every person who will die. You don't need to convince me you're a monster. I already know it. That's a memory. Her throat tightened so much it was hard to swallow as she reached towards him. Draco, you are not a monster. You didn't have any choice. Did you think I still hate you once I remembered? She stepped closer and caught his face in her hands. Even before I remembered, you were the only thing that ever felt safe. She stared up into his eyes. I left a note. Did you get my note? I love you. He flinched as though struck, and she felt his jaw tremble against his fingers. He started to shake his head, and she stilled him, pulling closer. I love you, she said more firmly, her voice shaking with intensity. I love you. I will always love you. Always, until there's nothing left of me. She rose up on her toes, tilted her chin forward, and kissed him. He was frozen, and her lips touched his, as her lips touched his. I love you, I love you, I love you. She says the words against his mouth. His fingers slid along the curve of his jaw as her lips kept moving against his. He still didn't move. She pressed herself closer to him. Then he shook. His hand rose up to capture her face, and he pulled her against himself. His fingers tangled in her hair as his palms cradled her cheeks. His mouth was burning. He kissed her and kissed her. He kissed her like he was starving, like he'd been drowning. His tongue and his teeth and his lips pressed against hers. His mouth brushed against his, and she nipped him. His tongue flicked against her lower lip and slid against hers. It was as though he were trying to pour himself into her or consume her. His fingers slid along the shelves of her ear, and his thumbs caressed the arches of her cheekbones. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and she met every movement of his lips. He drew a ragged gasp against her mouth, and she felt him shuddering. He kissed her until she could feel the desperation in his blood. Then he drew back, resting his forehead against hers. His hands were shaking as he held her. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for everything I did to you, he said, his voice hoarse and broken. I love you. You left, and I never told you I loved you. She asked him to stay every night. They never did more than kiss. Draco's hands rarely moved below her shoulders when he kissed her. She would curl up in his arms and fall asleep listening to him breathe. During the day, he'd leave to work, and she'd research, giving Topsy longer and longer lists of books she wanted. Curse breaking, dark arts, lethal curses, potions, encyclopedias, and ingredient indexes, curse analytics, muggle medical textbooks. She hoped if the curse was broken, she'd be able to cleanse the mark. But after running a mental simulation of the procedure 4 different ways, she concluded it was impossible. The curse in the mark wasn't dermal. It was like his runes. Even if she could cut out all the muscle tissue in his forearm and remove and regrow his bones, assuming she could keep his hand in stasis comprehensively enough to preserve the tissue and nerves for up to 24 hours, the dark mark would just regrow along with the bones, muscles, and skin. Draco estimated they would have a few hours at most once her manacles were removed. It was possible that Voldemort would know immediately. He was intensely interested in Hermione. If Hermione were trying to get Draco to flee with her, there wouldn't be time for an elaborate healing procedure. The removal would have to be fast. He'd have to cut off his left arm just below the elbow. The thought left a painful knot in the pit of her stomach as she asked for more resources on amputation techniques. She wasn't sure even if amputation would be successful. The wound was cursed not to heal. Paired with magically accelerated hemorrhaging, the result was rapidly lethal. Well, same thing. It wasn't like the gradual deadliness of the curse Dumbledore had received on his hand. The damage refused to be contained or slowed, magically or otherwise. Tourniquets, essence of Dittany, cauterization, healing spells. Severus and Draco had tried without success to stop the bleeding. It was as though the curse was determined to force all the blood out of the body. She kept narrowing and narrowing the options, and every day felt like a screw being more tightly turned. Her headaches stopped being debilitating, but they were steadily replaced by shriveling anxiety. The date on the wall felt like a daily death knell. She researched until she couldn't see to read. It was the only way she knew how to make herself feel useful. Feeling useful was all she was doing. She knew Draco was letting her feel like she was contributing. He was letting her try, so she'd feel like she'd done something. It was just an outlet, like doing crunches in her room or searching the manor for Garrett Like doing crunches in her room or searching the manor from Garrett to dungeon in the hopes of finding a weapon. It was something for her to do, something to preoccupy her with. When Draco was with her, he treated her like it was all goodbye. He looked at her like he was saying goodbye. He touched her like he was saying goodbye. He'd wrap his arms around her shoulders and rest his head on hers, and she could feel it. One morning, she returned from showering and found all her books gone. Topsy was standing beside the bed. The healer is coming this day. The master says all the books is needing to be put away. Hermione gave a resigned nod and went and stared out the window. It was summer, lush and beautiful. She hadn't been outside in over a month. It felt like such an effort to go all the way outside to try to stay calm under the open sky. It would waste time and energy she could be spending trying to find a way to remove Draco's mark. There was a soft crack, and she looked over her shoulder and found that Draco had appeared. Stroud will be arriving soon. Hermione nodded. Topsy mentioned it. He walked closer and stood, staring out the window beside her. When did you last go outside? Hermione kept looking down at the maze. She reached out and rested her finger on the grille of the window. I don't remember. Early May? You should. Her finger slipped away from the glass and dropped to her side. It's too open. I don't want to. Draco was silent. Fresh air would be good for you. It might help you eat more. Hermione looked down. I don't have time. Read downstairs. Sit by an open window. Used to always go outside. Her jaw threatened to tremble. She tensed and shrugged. Well, her voice was careful. I was different then. I'm not talking about years ago. You used to go outside of the estate. You used to go out of this room. Now you hardly do that. She shrugged and kept staring out the window. I didn't have anything else to do. He gave a sharp sigh. Granger, why won't you go out? Hermione was quiet for a moment. She rested a fingertip against the glass and drew canaz for knowledge, creativity, and inspiration. She'd never imagined how much she would miss writing, how she'd taken for granted the ability to put her thoughts down on paper to organize and return to. She missed writing almost as much as she missed reading. She found herself often drawing on the windows to try to process everything crammed into her mind. Beside Canaz, she drew Sowilo for success, wholeness, and Dagaz for breakthrough, the power of change and hope. Then she sighed and drew Isa above them all and tapped it before looking down. I feel the safest, calmest in this room. There's still a lot of processing, and it affects me more when I'm in other parts of the house. She swallowed. Her shoulder twitched. I might panic, and then you won't let me research anymore. Draco went still. Granger. His voice faded briefly. Don't keep yourself in a cage because of me. Hermione looked up at him quickly. I'm not. I don't want to take chances. There are more important things than going outside. Draco started to reply but stopped, his expression going cold. Stroud's here. Hermione felt her stomach sink. All right. He left to bring Stroud, and Hermione sat on the edge of her bed, willing her heartbeat to slow. The door swung open, and the healer entered, Draco only a few steps behind her, his indifferent mask fully in place. You're conscious this time, Stroud said, glancing over at Hermione as she conjured a table in the middle of the room. Hermione's stomach flipped as she stood and walked slowly over, seating herself on the edge before being commanded to. She and Draco had discussed the eventuality of Stroud's arrival, but being braced for it didn't make her heart pound any less painfully in her chest. Stroud flicked her wand and cast several diagnostics. Well, you're not comatose or on the verge of starvation anymore. I would have visited sooner for this exam, but the High Reeve was afraid you were too delicate. You'll be entering the second trimester this week. Stroud looked Hermione over with a critical eye. Ugh, you're quite sickly looking. You should still be outdoors at least an hour. You don't want to disadvantage a child by neglecting your health. Hermione's chest tightened and her fingers crept protectively towards her stomach. Stroud waved her wand and the glowing orb appeared, larger, about the size of Hermione's fist. The rapid, fluttering light filled the room like a star. Hermione stared at it and forgot to breathe. Stroud inspected the orb and cast several spells on it before scribbling in her file. Still healthy. Doesn't appear that the coma or seizures caused any developmental damage. Stroud cast another diagnostic spell. As it manifested, her face fell. Ugh. Female. What a pity. That is the end of chapter 66. That is a lot of info. Fuck Stroud, man. Shout out to the girl, baby. It's a girl. It's a girl. So, Stroud is such a fucking bitch. Okay, so a lot just happened. A lot just fucking happened. Chapter 67. Here we go. Chapter 67. And this is the last chapter for tonight. Hermione felt as though her heart was in her throat. It was a girl. A little girl. It made the pregnancy so real that it was jarring. Stroud inspected the diagnostic further and sighed. Well, not what we hoped for. She banished the reading with a flick of her wand. It's unfortunate. We've had several surrogates unexpectedly miscarry after it turned out that they carried girls. Her eyes slid past Hermione over to Draco. Of course, that won't be a concern here, given that the pregnancy is primarily a mechanism of memory retrieval. In your case, High Reeve, there's always the next surrogate for a real heir. Hermione felt herself grow cold. Her throat tightened and she looked away from Stroud, her eyes darting over to Draco. He was staring at the fluttering orb as though he couldn't look away, but his posture shifted slightly. Hermione wished she could touch him, hold his hand. It felt like a moment they should be sharing. She was pregnant with a baby girl, but she felt as though all the reaction she could make was to sit quietly, avert her eyes, and wonder how it might have been under different circumstances. Draco still barely acknowledged the pregnancy beyond how it related to Hermione's health, despite her repeated insistence that she was not going to get an abortion. He refused to treat it as having anything to do with him. It was her pregnancy, her baby. When she tried to talk about it, he grew terse, and if she pushed, he excused himself and left. He blinked, and the muscles in his jaw rippled as he caught himself and averted his eyes, staring stonily out the window. Hermione looked back at Stroud, continued to cast spells and scribble notes. Stroud cast another spell, and a projection of Hermione's brain appeared. Hermione's memories were glowing gold in the same hue as the fluttering orb. All the little glowing lights scattered across her brain had changed color, and some appeared to have fractured. There were splinters of light running along what appeared to be the neural pathways. How interesting, Stroud said as she probed it. What did the mind healer say when they saw the development? Draco looked away from the window and stared at the projection. His nostrils flared as though he smelled something foul. To keep her calm if she ever woke, and to prevent further seizures if I wanted to avoid permanent brain damage and loss of her memories. He sneered at Stroud. You should be grateful your method of forced recovery didn't kill her. I can't imagine the Dark Lord would have taken the news well. Stroud folded slightly and looked a bit nervous. I said when I proposed it that it was theoretical, Stroud said, her voice stiff. I made it quite clear to the Dark Lord. Has she shown any signs of having recovered her memories? No, Draco said, his lip curling as he glanced derisively at Hermione, then focused on Stroud intent. The only discernible difference in her behavior since pregnancy is that she's more unstable and barely able to leave her room. Stroud sighed and prodded at the projection. It's a pity we can't just dose her with Veritaserum. How long did the mind healer say not to use magic on her brain? As long as the magic levels remain critically heightened. Anything that disrupts the brain magically, with the exception of anticonvulsants, should be avoided. He estimated the legmancy would be safe to attempt by the beginning of the 3rd trimester, assuming her stress levels drop to a point where her anxiety stops being a trigger for her seizures. Draco's eyes hooded and he looked impassive. His hand was near his wand. Stroud's pursed her lips. That's an unfortunately long wait. You informed him that the memories were urgent. Draco waved his hand dismissively. You've seen the reports. Based on the mind healer's analysis, the more crucial the information is, the more protected it is. Attempting to extract it prematurely could result in recovering nothing but non-essential information. Memories are not discrete. They overlap associatively. The memories the Dark Lord is most eager for will not be the first memories recovered, but the last ones. Stroud prodded at the projection of Hermione's brain once more before banishing it. Well, now that she's reaching the end of the 1st trimester, she should begin eating and recovering physically. It may not be a concern for you, given that the baby won't be the heir, but elevated cortisol levels can affect a baby. With the restrictions the surrogates have on their behavior, stress can manifest in unusual ways if unaddressed. Exercise is a crucial way of channeling it. You should command her to exercise as soon as she appears stable enough to manage it. Draco gave a short, indifferent nod of acknowledgement. He escorted Stroud out a few minutes later. Hermione went over and pressed her ear against the door. She could hear Stroud's voice receding down the hallway. If you don't want to keep a female, the lab will take it immediately after delivery. The Dark Lord understands that not everyone wants the obligation of multiple children. The ones with good potential will be raised to contribute to the program's next phase, and the others will be used full lab subjects. There's still so little understood about early magical development. Hermione's tongue curdled in her mouth, and her stomach wrenched so violently that she nearly vomited in the middle of the floor. She shakily went and sat on the edge of her bed. Draco would never let that happen. Draco would never let it happen. He would never let it happen to her or to their baby. Sorry, I read that wrong. He would never let it happen to her, to their baby. But that wouldn't save the other surrogates or their babies. She closed her eyes. She hoped Draco would return soon so she could ask to have her books back. Otherwise, there was nothing to do but worry and worry and worry. It was impossible to do anything but worry and then worry over the fact that she was so worried. Relatable. Elevated cortisol could impact the baby. Stay calm. Otherwise, she might have a seizure. Then Draco might not let her research. Then she tried not to think about it. She mentally reviewed healing spells and developed theoretical potions for counteracting hemophilia and stopping hemorrhaging. It was nearly an hour before Draco reappeared. As soon as she saw him, her mind immediately returned to the appointment. It was going to be a girl. Now that she knew the gender, she could picture it more clearly. Before, it had been abstract, a baby. Now it was a girl, a baby girl. There were portraits of Malfoy's children. Whoa, sorry, I read that wrong. There were portraits of Malfoy children in the manor, always blonde and gray-eyed, and male. The Malfoy line was predominantly entirely male. Hermione couldn't think of any portraits featuring female Malfoy descendants, an heir and occasionally a spare. Hermione didn't know if it were a genetic anomaly or, more likely, a selection process. Perhaps the Malfoys didn't traditionally keep female pregnancies. Draco stopped a foot away from her and stood. He seemed only partly present, as though his mind were elsewhere. Hermione's hands were laid against her stomach as she watched him carefully. "So, it's a girl," she said. His expression instantly closed, and he gave a short nod. Her mouth twitched. "I didn't know Malfoys had girls." "No," he said, shrugging. Hermione felt as though there were a stone lodged in her throat. Does that matter to you, then? That it's not a boy?" Draco blinked and seemed to be suddenly roused from wherever his mind had been. "What? No." He stared at her. "The ginger has never mattered to me." The feeling in her throat was replaced by a heaviness in her chest. Hermione nodded. "All right. I just wondered." Draco eyed her. "It's an enchantment on the bloodline intended to keep the estate intact. Malfoys require a marriage bond to produce an heir with a witch." "Oh," was all she could think to say. That's actually important. After several seconds, she added, "Stroud doesn't know?" He shook his head and looked down and appeared to be studying the polish on his shoes. "It never seemed worth mentioning, given that the necessity of an heir made my efforts appear earnest." Hermione looked away. Get married, have children, grow old with someone. There'd been a point when she'd been resigned to the fact that she'd never have those things. She told herself that there'd be more important things to console herself with. Harry and Ron would still be alive. Voldemort would be defeated. The world would be better. That knowledge would be enough to fill the emptiness. But Harry and Ron weren't alive. Voldemort wasn't defeated. The world felt so broken, she didn't know how it would ever be better. Now she felt the loss of the simple things. "Can I have my books back before you go?" she asked, looking up at him. "I'll have Topsy bring them." She looked down at her shoes. "I'll try to go for walks again. Stroud was right. It's important for the baby, so I should do it." She looked up and gave a small smile. Draco stared at her, and eventually her smile faded. She looked away towards the window. It was so open. Her fingers twitched and she slipped them behind her back. "I'll go with you," he said. "You don't need to go alone." He extended his hand and she took it. They went outside and walked slowly along a lane lined with fruit trees, their fingers entwined. The blossoms had faded and been replaced by leaves. Their path was canopied by the arching branches. "I used to climb these trees when I was a boy," Draco abruptly said. Hermione looked over at him in surprise. He'd always been silent during the walks before. It was unfamiliar to have him conversational. He stared down the lane, his expression far away. "I was told not to climb them, but when my lessons for the days were done, I'd come and try to." He looked over at the gnarled apple tree near them. "I got stuck in that tree. It seemed enormous to me at the time. Topsy tried to get me down, but I wouldn't let her. I sat on the branch, shouting for my mother for an hour before she came home from Diagon Alley." Hermione studied the branch only a few feet above the ground, and her mouth quirked up. Draco turned. "If we go down this lane and cut across the field, there's a pond where I used to catch frogs. There are usually ducks and herons there. I was given a net for my 5th birthday, and I used to try to catch anything I could find. They were for my zoo. I used to say as I was going to be a zoologist when I grew up. I was very set on the idea that I would travel to Africa someday on an expedition." My father was horrified. Draco was expressionless as he spoke. Hermione felt a growing sense of unease. "I was the terror of fairies and gnomes," he added after another minute. I got bitten once by a gnome, trying to dig it up. Blood everywhere. He gave an empty laugh. My mother was terrified I'd end up with a scar. He started walking slowly down the lane, still holding Hermione's hand. I always liked flying. My father gave me a toy broom when I was 2, despite my mother's objections. Theodore Knott and I used to race each other all over the estate. I nearly broke my arm crashing into the side of the manor when I was 8. He was quiet after that until they reached the end of the trees. Topsy will go with you. She cared for several babies. She nearly raised me for the first few years when my mother was unwell. She helped Ginny with James, too. He looked over at Hermione. It's arranged now. Her ownership will transfer to you. She's a good elf. She'll know any stories about me you could ever want. Hermione stopped walking as she realized what he was doing. So sad. He was trying to give her what she wanted for him. Acknowledging that he would have a child meant acknowledging that he wouldn't meet it. He was telling her stories so she could tell his daughter about what he'd been like before school, before the war. He was making arrangements. He stared out across the fields. He stared out across the fields. The magic on the estate will go dormant unless my father produces a new heir, he said a moment later. Assuming he does not, the manor will recognize and accept a descendant if she wants to claim it. There are documents I'll have for you to make a formal claim on the estate if you want it legitimized. But there's no reason you'll have to return. There are vaults in your name already and other assets I've transferred that would be easier to liquidate. Hermione's shoulders started to shake. Draco looked at her. His eyes were a stormy gray and intent as he studied her face. I brought you too far. You're tired. We'll go back. Hermione still didn't move. Her throat felt thick and her legs were threatening to give out beneath her. She had 1,000 things she wanted to say and felt at a loss about how to communicate any of them. He stepped closer. Can you walk back? She managed to shake her head infinitesimally. He stepped closer, moving slowly and gauging her reaction. He slipped his left arm around her waist and lifted her up into his arms, carrying her back towards the manor. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face into his shoulder as she started to cry. She cried in his arms the whole way back to her room. That night, her head was rested on his chest as she lay in bed and watched the clock move. Draco had one hand on her head, twisted through her hair, while the other hand traced patterns along her arms through her robes. She sat up and stared down at him. He looked up at her, his expression guarded. She reached out, resting her hand on his chest, then leaned over and kissed him. She closed her eyes and memorized the sensation of their lips meeting, how their noses brushed against each other, the faint stubble along his jaw under her fingers as she pressed her hand against his face. She deepened the kiss, losing herself in the sensation of him. She could smell the sharp bite of cedarwood oil in his clothes and the oak moss and papyrus on his skin. His palm caressed her throat, and she shivered against him, pressing herself closer and tangling her fingers in his hair. The kisses were slow and deep and so familiar. She knew this heat in her abdomen, the catching sensation in her chest, and the thrum in her veins. It was the most intimate and treasured thing she'd ever known. She'd hidden it away where it couldn't be taken, buried it until she lost it within her own mind. She wanted it back. Her hand on his chest began sliding along, running down his torso. His hand closed around hers and stilled it. When she tried to pull it free, he stopped kissing her. What are you doing? Hermione sat back and looked down at him, drawing a deep breath. I want to try to have sex with you. She watched his eyes as she said it. His irises darkened as his corneas bloomed, but his expression grew hard and closed. No, That's not happening. Hermione looked down at her hand in his. I don't want the last time I had sex with you to be when you were... Her mouth twitched. When it was forced. Draco was silent for a moment. No. Her fingers spasmed and she withdrew her hand from where he'd stopped it, giving a short nod. All right. She lay down and rested her head on his shoulder, pressing her face into the heat of his body that radiated through his shirt. They said nothing for several minutes. Why? He finally asked. I told you. You always have more reasons than one. She was quiet and pressed herself more tightly against his side. I can't remember what it felt like to have sex before, she finally said. I know we were together, but it's so far away. Like something in the distance that I can't make out the details of. When I try to remember, I just remember what it was like here, when you had to every month. So I thought... She paused and was silent for several moments. There were so many ways it could go wrong. It wouldn't be the way it was in the past. It would be tinged and affected by everything that had happened. She might panic or find that once they reached a certain point, she was unable to back out or to ask him to slow down or stop. Because remember, her brain from Umbridge, the brainwashing. She might have a seizure. That's why she can't say no. That's what I just want you to remember, the brainwashing. She might have a seizure. It might destroy the fragile safe haven they have found in each other, the sense of security she found in him. It might poison the past. She curled more tightly against him. Never mind. Draco didn't say anything. She fell asleep listening to his heartbeat. However, after that conversation, the way he kissed her was different. His hands lingered longer. His kisses weren't just searing adoration, but something else. Something hungrier. Something she could feel in her blood. When he returned after being gone for 2 days, his touch felt like fire. His hands tangled in her hair. She drew his left hand down along her neck to the base of her throat and then further along her body. She felt him... Sorry, I think I just heard Mountain make a weird noise. I don't hear anything now. Okay. She felt him inhale so sharply through his teeth that the air moved against her skin. She gave a shivering moan. He's fine. I think he sneezed. Okay, sorry. She gave a shivering moan. Tell me to stop, he said, his mouth hot against her throat. Tell me to stop. She tangled her fingers in his robes and pulled him closer. Don't stop, she said. I don't want you to stop. His teeth dragged across her skin as he nipped at her throat. She pulled his hand up to the buttons of her dress and started undoing them. His fingers brushed along her bare skin, and he peppered open-mouthed kisses across her shoulders. This was good. This was familiar. He used to touch her this way. She could remember this. He kissed down her sternum until his head dropped back and she was gasping. His hand slid over her shoulders and up her spine. Her hands followed along the curve of his jaw and down over his shoulders, trying to touch all of him. The sense of touching him was buried in her, a dormant physical sense of familiarity that made her heart race as it was reawakened. She drew his mouth back to hers and kissed him more deeply. I love you, she said against his kiss. I love you. I wish I told you 1,000 times. She started unbuttoning his shirt and pushing it off, running her hands across his skin. Tell me to stop and I'll stop, he said against her lips. Don't stop. Her heart was pounding in her chest and she closed her eyes and focused on the sensation, the weight and warmth and sensation of his skin against hers. She breathed in against his shoulder and traced her fingers over the scars on his back. Close your eyes. She felt her clothes slipping off and a coiling heat spread through her. His hand brushed along the side of her breast. It felt different, highly sensitive, as though his touch had run electricity through her body. She didn't think it had ever felt that way before. She shivered into the contact and gave a low gasp. He dragged his thumb over her nipple and her whole body shuddered. She felt his mouth on the inside of her right breast. Teeth. She went rigid. like being dunked into ice water. And suddenly the heat was gone. She couldn't. Sharp, cold little rocks. She wanted to stop. These are memories. She tried to breathe, but her lungs refused to expand. Just breathe, and it would go away. Her throat closed. Her fingers twitched against Draco's shoulders. She couldn't breathe. The memories were pouring over her in a rush. Memories. Just close your eyes. Better than Lucius. She just wanted it all to stop. She tried to blink it away, but it wouldn't go. Stop! She forced the word out. Draco froze instantly and started to draw back. She gave a dry sob and wrapped her arms tightly around his shoulders, burying her face against his throat as she fought to breathe and willed her heart to stop pounding painfully in her chest. Stop shaking. Draco sat immobile, not touching her. She couldn't even feel him breathing. She drew several slow breaths and shakily lifted her head to look at him. Her chest hitched. It was too much for a moment. I think I'll be better now that I know I can say stop. It was good. Her fingers on him tightened. It was good until it wasn't. She swallowed hard, and Draco nodded. His pupils had contracted until his eyes looked like ice. His expression was tense and drawn as he looked at her. His expression was something she could shatter in her hands. He looked like something she could shatter in her hands. If she ruined this, she might be destroying the last good thing he had. She slipped her hand along the curve of his jaw and felt his pulse in the dip of behind the bone as she pressed her forehead against his. She wasn't going to cry, she told herself. She wasn't going to cry. They just needed more time. She went to the library. She had avoided it, but the elves were limited in their ability to cross-reference for her when she didn't know all the potential resources there might be there. Topsy fidgeted beside her as Hermione stood in the doorway, hesitating and trying to look up, not to look up. I want to start in the dark arts section, she said. Which parts? All of it. I want to see all the book titles. Hermione kept her eyes fastened on the floor or the shelves as she moved through the library. Focus on the books. Focus on the words. She had to save Draco. It didn't matter if she couldn't see the ceiling. She had to breathe. Sometimes repeating the reminder to herself worked. Other times it didn't. She woke up dazed in her room, and every muscle in her body was burning. Draco was sitting beside her, her hand in his. She stared at him in bewilderment, trying to remember how she'd gotten there. You had a seizure in the library, he said, expressionless. You had a panic attack. Topsy couldn't calm you, and you had a seizure. A severe one. Even with the interference of the anticonvulsant potion. I was in Austria. Hermione didn't say anything. Her throat felt as though she'd screamed it raw. Draco stared out the window for a moment and then sighed. He began to massage the center of her palm without looking at it, tapping his wand across the pressure points until the muscles relaxed and her fingers unfurled. You don't get to have everything, Granger. There is a point when you have to realize you aren't going to get everything you want, and you have to choose and let it be enough for you. His hand stopped moving, and he just stared out the window for a minute. He swallowed slowly and turned to stare down at her. The mind healer said if you have another seizure like that, you may cause irreversible brain damage to yourself and likely miscarry. Hermione pressed her lips together and pulled her hand away, curling into a tight ball around her stomach. I can't leave you behind, she said, her voice thick. She felt the bed shift, and Draco brushed her hair off her face, tucking a curl behind her ear as he leaned over her. He gave a low sigh as his hand slipped down from her hair and rested on her shoulder. You'll have other people to take care of. You promised Potter to take care of Ginny and James. You have a baby who needs you, and you know that. Her hand pressed against her stomach, and she gave a low sob. I don't want to choose. Her voice was rasping, and it hurt to speak. I always have to choose, and I never get to choose you. I'm so tired of not getting to choose you. He squeezed her shoulder before his hand slid down to hers, and he began massaging away the rigid knots in it. You're not choosing. You promised anything I wanted. You promised that. Don't break yourself trying to save me. I want that more than anything else. Get away from this fucked up world. Let me get you out, Granger. Let me know you're safe away from all of this. Tell our daughter I saved you. That is what I want. She clumsily pushed herself upright. Her arms were not cooperative, but she forced herself up and gripped his hands. Draco, I'm so close. Give me more time and I'll find a way to remove your mark. I'm sure there's a way. Please don't make me stop trying. Draco sat back and stared at her. I gotta sit down. My feet are going numb. Hold on. Draco sat back and stared at her. His eyes flickered. I've never known anyone as bad as keeping promises as you. You are quite possibly the worst promise keeper I've ever met. Her throat tightened, but she pushed her chin up and met his stare. I keep the ones that matter. Draco raised an eyebrow. No, what you do is make conflicting promises and then pick and choose which ones to keep depending on what you want. I've devoted some thought to your mythology. His voice was light. The lightness vanished and he glanced away. That's why you never seem to keep any promises that I care about. Hermione looked down. Draco, Hermione? She looked up at him. He still used her name so rarely. He stared at her, his expression serious and tired. You care about this baby. She was all you cared about before your memories came back. Protecting her was all you thought about every minute of the day. Now, you're so preoccupied with trying to save me that you're letting yourself forget that she needs you, that she's dependent on you. I can't protect her from you. Endangering yourself to save me is risking her. Hermione's jaw trembled and she looked down. I'm so close, Draco. I'm just missing one piece. Draco gave a sharp sigh. Granger, if you miscarry, the Dark Lord will have you brought in to examine your mind. His voice was flat and matter-of-fact, and she flinched at the words. You promised. If it stressed you, you promised you'd stopped. How many panic attacks are you up to since you started going into the library by yourself? She ground her teeth together, setting her jaw. So stupid. It's stupid that it won't go away. I'm so close. I'm almost sure I can figure it out. But the harder I try to put the pieces together, the worse it gets. But I am so close. What if I wait and don't figure it out until it's too late? Her chest started spasming and she pressed her hand against her sternum. Draco gripped her by the shoulders, his expression hard. Let it go. His teeth flashed as he spoke. I was never supposed to be someone you tried to save. Hermione shook her head doggedly. What am I supposed to do? Hermione shook her head doggedly. What am I supposed to do if you make me stop? Draco's lip curled as though he wanted to snarl at her. She didn't blink. His hands dropped away from her shoulders and he gave an exasperated sigh. Fine, he said in a resigned voice. You can continue researching in your room. But if you want to go into the library, you will wait and go with me. I will have Topsy restrain you if you try to go alone. Understood? Hermione gave a small nod. She stayed in her room for the most part. This is what I mean. Whenever he had time, Draco took her outside to walk and then to the library, standing next to her and watching as she spent hours browsing. He cast analytic spells on his arm for her to study and wrote notes for her. She was waiting outside the library doors for Draco to return for the evening when she heard 2 successive cracks of apparition in the foyer down the hall. Her stomach immediately dropped. No one should be able to enter the estate unless Draco permitted it. If Draco were bringing someone back without warning, it was likely Severus, which meant she'd run out of time. Or else Draco had died, and the protections on the estate had collapsed. Her heart was in her throat as she shrank back into the shadows and strained to hear. There was a notable decline in your performance of late. The Dark Lord wishes to transfer the task to someone with less conventional methods. Lucius's Malfoy blood-curdling drawl floated down the hallway. Hermione went cold with terror. One less matter for me to attend to. I'm hardly lacking in attention currently, she heard Draco say in a cool voice. In the silent, empty house, the voices filled the foyer and bounced down the hallway. She could hear every word clearly. Indeed not. It seems I cannot pick up a paper without finding your face splashed across it. My son, the infamous High Reeve. Draco made no reply. I must admit, I aspired to see my heir achieve slightly more than an international reputation as a mass murderer. A pity you couldn't maintain your anonymity. You're more a hunting dog than a prodigy. Hermione could hear the sneer in Lucius's tone. Hermione began inching slowly down the hall, her fingers pressed against the wall. Why, Father, I thought I'd inherited my exceptional talent for murder from you. I am, after all, the Dark Lord's humble servant, like my father and his father before that. Draco's voice was taunting, but Hermione could hear the tension hidden in his tone, the reserve. There is an art in the contributions my father and I made. Using unforgivables is merely pouring out an excess of emotion. Agony is meant to be an art form. There's no craft in the service you provide, the Dark Lord. You've allowed yourself to be used as a blunt-edged weapon. Of all the skills you could cultivate, I find your choices disappointing. There was a concealed passage in the wall nearby. If Hermione could just reach it, she could hide, wait there until Draco came for her. There is also less blood on my clothes, she heard Draco say with a dismissive drawl. Do you think the Dark Lord achieved greatness simply because of the quality of killing curses he could cast? Do you think such an ability launched Gelbert Grindelwald to infamy? Greatness is more than merely raw power. It requires drive, cunning, and inspirational vision. You're a fool to think your fame as an executioner gives you a true significance. You have no followers. No one is loyal to you. Fear is not enough. The Dark Lord learned that painful lesson the first Wizarding War. The key to his success was his ability to expand his vision when he returned to power. An executioner is little more than a footnote. The Dark Lord gave you an opportunity to apprehend the Last Order member. It would have immortalized you in history. But after 4 months, the floorboard under Hermione's foot creaked and Lucius' voice stopped. Hermione froze, her heart in her throat. Is someone there, Draco? That is the end. Tough spot to end on. Chapter 67 is over. Wow, thank you for all the follows. Chad, Ariel, Jeffrey, Stitch, Jim, and Avis. Welcome to the Poop Coven. Welcome to Smutty Saturday. We're going to do a short aftercare because it's, again, 4 a.m. But if you were just checking in now, thank you all for all the follows. I'm so sorry if I didn't get to address them earlier. We, on Saturdays, read a book called Manacled. It is a fan fiction, albeit it's much better than the original Harry Potter, but it's a fan fiction based in the universe of Harry Potter that is a Hermione dark romance. It is absolutely incredible. So I highly recommend, if this was engaging or interesting for you, go to that link, that YouTube link right there. All the previous episodes are there. It is absolutely captivating and incredible. We read 2 chapters every Saturday, but it is very triggering. There is a lot of stuff that happens in it, so viewer discretion is advised. But welcome to the Smut Hut. Welcome to the Good Girls Club. So any thoughts? I always just want to ask, any thoughts after we wrap up? That was these 2 chapters, every 2 chapters are going to be loaded. Any thoughts, questions, initial reactions, any initial feelings as we work our way to the end of this absolutely incredible book that is 3 volumes, by the way. So we're into volume 3 right now. Any just off the cuff questions, concerns? If there's nothing, we can just end. But I'm always just curious if anything. I know it's a lot to process, but I'm always just curious what your thoughts are. I think these 2 chapters were interesting because I know that there's a lot of Draco is just a bad guy. And I'm just curious if that feeling or is swaying a little bit. I think my memory blocked at some of these moments because parts I do remember. Addie, I'm not surprised. Manacled, we all block out parts of Manacled if we can avoid them because it's brutal. Absolutely brutal and moving and incredible. But it is I think, if I could just give my 69 cents, I think these 2 chapters were really interesting because I wanted you guys to know that the horrible things that Hermione endured, right? They're not, I think so many books that I've read, other books, like a good example is, again, like I don't want to spoil anything. So there's other books that I've read where the FMC, the female main character, goes through something very, very traumatic. And for lack of a better term, they're immediately banging, basically. She goes through something very traumatic. She comes back and they're just like they basically kind of gloss over it, and they don't allow her to process her trauma. And I really, really think Manacled does such a good job of not swiping it under the rug. I think that's so important, and I think it's one of the best iterations I've seen of that, where they actually are focusing on it, talking about it, trying to work through it in a healthy, slow way. And I think that's really, really good. It's hard to remember what was memories from the beginning to what's happening now. I'm glad you point that out. Andy, I got DM'd about that. What happens is when you're reading the book, when something's in a memory, it's italicized. You guys obviously can't see it. So I did get DM'd about that doing this isn't always helpful because sometimes you guys are listening without looking. So I'm going to start saying memories so that I'll whisper it, but that you'll know I'm recalling a memory because that was actually addressed in a DM. So thank you to the lurker who DM'd about that. But it really, I feel like the gray parts of him are really starting to shimmer. And I think that you, first of all, also, any thoughts about that they're having a daughter? I like that so much. Any thoughts about it that they're having a girl? I also think it's something that will be addressed potentially, maybe not, but I want to address it. It's not a spoiler. There was a moment where Stroud was there and he was looking at that orb, right? That glowing orb that lit up the whole fucking room. And he stared at it. And after he stared at it, I want you to notice he started calling it a her. And he even referred to it as their daughter. And I thought that was kind of subtly beautiful because for women, and I've never been pregnant, don't plan on being pregnant, but for a lot of women who want to have a baby or whatever, everyone deserves to have a choice in my opinion. But what's interesting is that they are mothers, again, situationally. I'm generalizing. They're mothers from the minute they have that baby in their body, right? But a lot of men don't become fathers until they hold their baby or they see it the first time. Like, for real. And I thought that was very subtle and kind of beautiful that Hermione said, I felt protected from the minute I found out I was pregnant. Whereas Draco was like, it's this thing, it's your baby, whatever, do what you want. And then afterwards, he's still saying she could do what she wants, but she made it very clear she's keeping the baby. But I thought that was a really subtly poetic, and again, if you've never read the book, there's so much to contend with, but I thought that was a lovely little thing. I love it that they're also going to look cute, especially since Ginny Boy, yes. He's lost and thought about his future could be, yes. It tracks that the bad guys don't want daughters in the story. And honestly, Andy, I thought that was another blood-curdling moment. That, again, there's so much that happens that we hear Hermione hearing Stroud overhear that the other Death Eaters are essentially giving up their baby girls to either become breeders or to be tortured in Dolivaw's experimental labs. So disturbing. It's unbelievable. Like, horrible. Absolutely horrible. And it does track that, girls aren't heirs. So, it does track. And I think that I love that it was brought, again, addressed. She goes, are you disappointed we're not having a boy? And he was like, I don't give a fuck. He's like, I don't care. And I think that also is another nice differentiating moment, that like, there's all these little moments that accumulate over time. It's sort of like, there's the saying like death by 1,000 cuts. Manacled is sort of like whatever the opposite of like death by, but like, it's like building the mountain by 1,000 little moments. Like, I just feel like that's what Manacled is. It's like all of these micro moments that happen between Draco and Hermione to create such a complex web that there's so many of them. Like, even if Hermione makes it out with her daughter, what about the others? How can you live your life knowing what's going on? I mean, it's a very good question. You'll have to. Good question, Andy. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Belt by 1,000-fold. Addie, that's such... Save that. Put it in the pocket. Save that at the end of the story, Addie. All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Good Girls Club. I just want to double check if we have another one or if the next one will be straight to YouTube. What month or what week are we in? What's today's date? No, you guys will have another one on the 18th. And then the following 2 episodes will be direct to YouTube. So again, get in the YouTube. Thank you, Jeffrey. Oh, we do it every Saturday. And if you want more, The Good Girls Club on YouTube. Here's the YouTube link. We do it every Saturday. And I also do some special episodes that go straight to YouTube. So get over there too. Thank you so much. This is called Smutty Saturday. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. I enjoy Manacled. I enjoy this story. We are nearing the end, which is insane. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the other side of the smut hut, baby gravies.
I can't put it down, it's my new addiction. It's all in my head, but I want non-fiction. I don't like the world, but I like fantasy. Fairies, fucking girls, and they're pretty. Highly, do you like to read? I wrote this so you'd sleep with me. It's like 199 degrees. When I go to the smut hut, SMUTHUT. All this filth I've gotta read. Mass men crossing boundaries brings me to my fucking knees. SMUTHUT. Throbbing, swelling, pulsing, peen. Big fat tits stick in between. SMUTHUT. SMUTHUT. Draco fucked Hermione. SMUTHUT. Draco fucked Hermione. I wake up alone staring at my ceiling. I try not to care, so I just start reading. Sits in the cup chair, he watches me finish. He just likes to stare, and my god, he's British. A job to satisfy his needs. Those man bets I just wanna squeeze. Feels like I'm gonna sneeze. Squid isn't pee-pee, won't somebody breed me? SMUTHUT. H-U-T. All this stuff I've gotta read. Mass men crossing boundaries brings me to my fucking knees. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Throbbing, swelling, pulsing, peen. Big fat tits stick in between. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Draco fucked Hermione. S-M-U-T-H-U-T. Draco fucked Hermione. Yes, he did. He fucked her real nice. Yes, he did. He fucked her twice. Yes, he did. He fucked her a lot. He fucked in the shadow. He fucked in the smart, babe. Sorry about that.